I found a poem on the hardness of women in the book of Montana women writers I bought for myself. It says, "It's possible I left years before I did. I knew that, but I needed help to say it."
All right. Welcome to another episode of Poets in Montana. And today we have with us Amy Pearson.
Hi.
Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been doing these now for over a year, and I'm trying to grab everybody, but trying to catch up to everybody is half the battle.
Yeah.
And I looked at your year, and it was like, boy, she's really busy.
Yeah.
Things have changed dramatically for you, I know, over the last year. And just a little bit of background before we get into all that, I guess, on our relationship.
Yeah.
I met you through Gary Lundy because you were a student of his at Western. Is that right? Or?
Well, you're close.
Okay.
I was working at the University of Montana Western, so I was in Dillon, and I met Gary through that experience. And we quickly realized we both liked to write poetry, and we just became friends quickly.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So you grew up in north central Montana.
Yeah, I went to high school in Conrad, so my folks' farm is just north of there, between Conrad
okay.
and Shelby. Oh.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was over in Augusta for a while, so we weren't that far apart. I mean, logistically at one point in time in my mind. That's interesting country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Eastern Front.
It's so beautiful, and I feel like it's highly underrated, and that's okay.
Yeah. I just saw pictures of one of my old ex-students who's now a teacher and has been for 30 years. In the Nashville, Tennessee schools or whatever, was home to visit, and I saw that she'd posted a bunch of pictures on Facebook, and it was like behind Augusta, which is like Haystack Butte and all that. They're real close to the front there. Oh my God, the flowers, the green, they've had a lot of rain.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is so beautiful. On my drive over today, I was just marveling in the green of the landscape with all this fresh rain and the clouds just kind of sitting over there. It's stunning with the big sky over there in the front.
Yeah,
the Rockies.
Yeah, it was almost too stunning when I first moved there, because I grew up here in like Hobbit country, all buried in the greenery and the mountain valleys and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Go over there and it was like being on the ocean.
Yeah, total exposure.
I mean, when you looked east, it was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Towards Conrad.
Yeah.
You could see Edmonton if you squinted.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
The vastness of it can feel a little overwhelming.
Well, especially if you come from this kind of a growing up experience. And I've heard other people say the same thing, coming over here and like being closed in and not liking it,
Yeah, well, my dad is a farmer, and so
Yeah.
whenever we're in country with trees or in the mountains, he feels very claustrophobic.
Right.
And I think that it's real. It's just
Yeah.
such a different sensation in the body.
Yeah, it's just the opposite of that other feeling of being exposed and So anyway, we and then I know you've done a lot of different things. You first went to school where?
I got my undergrad at Rocky Mountain College in Billings.
Oh, okay.
It's a little liberal arts college.
Yeah. And then you wound up going to Arizona State, is that right?
Yeah, I did. I did go to the University of Montana for a couple years and got my master's here. And then after that, I went to Arizona State and finished a PhD there.
All right. And you've been a lookout.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you were up at Flathead Valley Community College for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been a fire lookout and worked for the Forest Service and the Park Service. And I love that part of the experience of my life, spending time outside, and then teaching in different capacities too for the last 15 years or so. How many?
Tick-tock, yeah.
Yeah.
So when did poetry sort of grab you? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was really lucky to have an uncle who is very literary, and he was an educator and also a poet and a writer. And so just from a young age, he would just talk with me about language and words and sit me on his lap and read me some of the classic poets. And so I started engaging with poetry that way.
Oh, yeah.
And then just started writing things down at a young age and have always just loved poetry.
So you've been doing this since you were a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, making up poems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun, I think. A lot of people might disagree with this, I don't know.
Yeah, they're the weird ones.
Yeah. But anyway, and we came, I mean, you came to me in terms of, I'm thinking of you and your work. I'd read a few poems, kind of through Gary, because you guys were swapping things, and he would show me things you'd sent to him and stuff, being nosy and all that, years ago. But then he told me that you had a manuscript, and I was doing editing this poetry series for Foothills Publishing.
Yeah.
And I asked you if you had a manuscript, which I thought I knew you did.
Yeah.
And you did.
Yeah, that was all very serendipitous.
Yeah, and this is the result of that. It's a little poetry collection called Poems for Certain Women, and it's an interesting book. When did you write it again?
Well, I wrote it 15 years ago, or 16, and I was living in Missoula at the time, and I was a graduate student, and that was another time of a lot of changes going on in my life.
Yeah.
And so writing down the words is what really got me through that time of life. I would say poetry, I've been talking about this with some friends recently, has really been a way for me to process what's happening and process life and the emotions that I'm experiencing.
Right.
And so that's what I did at that time in life. And then I just saved all of those poems over the years and thought maybe someday I would put them together. And then a few summers ago, I received a little artist residency grant from a gentleman who lives up in the Flathead. And so I got to spend the summer and use some of those funds to work on the manuscript.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So why don't you share some of the manuscript with us?
I would love to. That would be great.
And I know that because I'm quite familiar with the manuscript, that a lot of the poems kind of almost run into each other. So feel free to share more than one or whatever you think you want to do.
Okay.
You know, because we can stop and talk about things at any point. So.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Mark. Well, the poems are organized according to different themes that I found as I was working through the poems. And you'll find as you read that the titles of the themes are included in the poems of those sections. So that was kind of fun for me while I was organizing and editing.
Right.
So it starts out with the hardness of women, and I shared, I think, my favorite poem from that section, but then it moves on to divorce is informal. So I'll read a few poems from this section.
Okay.
Divorce is informal. I called yesterday, the first time in a while, because you said not to. I didn't think you would answer, but I hoped you'd think of me. I was looking at pictures of my arm around your waist, you in those green silk boxers I gave you for your 26th. I was looking at your body, wondering how it could look so foreign to me. I told Thomas I couldn't remember how it felt to be around you. He thought it odd that what I remember is the beginning when we ate pizza and ice cream and when you stayed with me when I was sick and missed your psych exam. We held hands and sat on a rock by the Clark Fork. We took turns trying to explain to each other what happened. Then I thanked the rock we sat upon, the March sunlight streaming forth on my face. So I think while I was writing these, and hopefully as they get read, the variety of emotions that might be involved in separating from somebody that you love are present. And that can be a complicated experience where it's very sad, it's very painful, but it's also kind of an exciting new time in your life, full of uncertainty, which, as we all also know, can be full of a lot of really good things and some hard
Possibility.
things. Possibility.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good way to summarize.
Yeah.
I did a little reading with a book club in Troy, Montana recently at their library. And one of the librarian there, Cherie, who is a friend of mine, really likes this next section called The Awakening the best. So I'll read a few poems from here.
Yeah.
Okay. The Awakening. This morning I wake to the drizzle of soft rain. It's like the pitter-patter in my heart. It's like the slow drumbeat in my feet. It's like the sound of my own steps. It's like the wooden doors I push open, I push open, I push open. Give it to me, or I'm taking it.
I like how, I mean, there's so many short, almost, American haiku like pages, spots in the book. And that was a fun part about sort of going through it. And like I say, reading it almost in one sitting. It wasn't a problem to sit down and read it in one sitting last night, even going slowly because of the fact that there's not as many words there as you might find somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it is that kind of a collection of poetry. It's very spare. It's like Eastern sort of almost. But I think it's a good form for the whole experience. You're chronicling basically a change of life, a going in, a breaking apart, and then a going out or an opening kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the way you just summarized that.
Yeah. Well, it's a fun book to read, and I didn't mean to interrupt you or anything,
no,
but
I didn't feel that way, but I love that you felt that through the words. I think I spent some time in Japan.
Yeah. How long were you in Japan?
I was there for 2 years.
Teaching English? Or?
I was teaching English,
Okay,
yeah. But
okay.
I've always really enjoyed haiku as a form.
Right.
And that culture. So that makes sense to me intuitively when you say you can feel that in the words.
Right. Well, and it goes along with. I'm assuming that anybody who's a poet is a close observer, kind of a slow down person, and I'm assuming that you're that kind of a person based on this manuscript and spending time on a lookout. I mean, there are certain clues that are like, okay, this person could be a poet. In my way of thinking, anyway.
It seems like a lot of fire lookouts do like poetry or write poems. So,
Yeah.
And it also makes sense when you have that time and space to just sort of be where you are looking.
Right, and in your head.
Forced.
You're right there in front of you and in your head, and then what else are you going to do? You scribble, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one is from the section called Family Meeting. So I was in my mid-20s when I was leaving my husband, but still your family, the people who are in part of your life, are affected by what you do too, and your choices. And so there's a little section in here about that. I'll read one if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My mom gave me a necklace when I graduated with my master's degree. It's a Catholic cross with Jesus and Mary. People always wonder why I wear it, because I often express disdain towards the church. I think I wear it to feel close to her. She cried when she gave it to me, and I felt nothing. She cried on the phone the other day because it was the time of year we met him, whom she loves. All I could tell her was to move forward and choose to let him go. But I wanted to wear the cross to tell her that I'm sorry without her knowing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people are always involved in our lives, whatever happens. So, and then in a situation like that, in relationships, when somebody else comes in to the picture, and in a small town also, I mean, it's like everybody knows everybody, so you've known who these people are for a long time. Get together and yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I remember that being part of this process too, and feeling somewhat confused by that, right? Why would people that I haven't seen or known for, some time really have concern about what I'm doing or what my life is like? But in rural Montana, we know each other and we see what's going on.
Yeah, I was recently talking to somebody, I'm trying to think, it wasn't Latrabe. Oh, it was the next person I'm going to speak to in this line, Joe McGeeshik, who's an Indian guy from over on the other side.
I've met him.
You've met Joe? Yeah. He's a great guy and a good poet. And anyway, we were talking about how, that's so communal, and the whole tribal culture and the family and the tradition and the ancestry and all of that is so tied in family-wise, you might say. Small towns are like that. If you grow up in a small town, they're like that. It's like in a giant extended family, Everybody knows everybody's business, and which is not always a good thing, but they are concerned about you, and so they stick their nose in your business. For your own good.
Right, yes, of course, yeah. So it's been really interesting being back in Great Falls because I'm, close to my family and geographically close to them and close to the town where I grew up.
Right.
And so recently I've been spending more time back in the town, and it's so fascinating and I think important too for me right now in my life to sort of be who I am now, be who I always have been, but also embrace the fact that maybe some things have changed and maybe some things haven't. It's an interesting place to be, sort of full circle. Yeah.
When did you leave?
I left when I was 18, so that was in 2000, so I guess just 20 years ago.
Yeah, a little over 20 years ago, right? Yeah, I mean, I've been gone so long now, even though I hung out there. I mean, I lived there until I was almost 30, in and out, coming back and forth, but I wound up back there in the little town of Alberton. But, after I left, or right before and then just after I left, that things changed dramatically because of just the, it was a railroad town. And you see it across the state. When that pulls out, then everything changes, and the dynamic and all the people who were there and the families, and they start drifting away, and then people die out, and it's replaced. I would guess that you have a lot of people still in Conrad because it's a little bit bigger, and it's an agriculture center. That they're still connected there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just in town in Conrad Monday, and I was going to some of the different businesses there locally for a new gig that I'm doing, and I encountered so many familiar faces, from my high school days. So it's been, a little over 20 years, but it was very overwhelming. A lot of people are still there, can still be there, and because of how the economy is set up in that area. So amazing to me.
Yeah. Those who stay and those who go. I mean, I kind of, on a broader sense, have counted myself that way in terms of Montana, because so many people back then that I grew up with and whatnot wound up leaving the state for work or for other reasons, you know. And I just thought, well, I just don't want to leave the state, you know. It was just too much that I liked about being here.
Yeah.
And so I stayed.
Yeah. I've been trying to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, my whole life in some different ways, right?
Yeah,
like, let's
right.
go to graduate school. Let's go to Asia for a little while.
Right.
But I always get, in a good way, I mean, I'm a nostalgic person,
Right.
but I'm a fifth generation. I know that gets dropped a lot, but I
Right.
really am, and I feel the heritage of this place very strongly, and it just
Right.
pulls me back. I miss the landscape when I'm gone.
Yeah, there's something about that you know, that I think is in, you know, somewhere in those, all those neurons that are in there, that this connection to landscape and are in there from generations, maybe, you know, from time back.
Yeah.
Lots of things that are from time back are inside that we are not even aware of, that play on us in different ways, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like dreams,
Yeah.
unconscious things, you know.
Yeah. Do you dream about the landscape?
You know, I mean, I don't necessarily. I used to keep a dream log. Did you ever do that?
No, I haven't.
Wow, I did that years ago one time, and it was crazy. Yeah, I mean, you know, you had to force yourself. What I did was I drank a lot of water before I went to bed, so I'd have to pee.
Oh.
And it woke me up, and as soon as I did that, I wake up in a dream, and I grab that dream journal right by the bed, and I just write down all the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
And then I'd go, you know,
Go on
relieve
in.
myself and go back to sleep. But because I had to do that, because if you give yourself, right, you know, 2, 3, 4 minutes, I
It's
forget
gone.
about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I do journal in the mornings. Like, that's when I sit down every day and do some writing. So sometimes a dream will pop up, but like you're saying, it's a very specific kind of state that you're in. And I don't know about you, but when you write those out, I mean, the sensibility of them is very unique, or you can't read it in a linear way.
Oh, no, totally. They make great poems.
Yeah.
Dreams
it's a
do,
good
you know.
little smattering
Because
of
they're
something.
surprising and they're weird and they're,
Yeah, don't make sense.
yeah, but then they do. You know, it's
But they
weird.
do.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Well, how about something? Can you dig something else out there that you want to read us out of that baby?
Yeah, and I actually brought another
great.
poem. Is that okay if I
Oh no,
share
yeah,
that?
I was
Okay.
hoping that you did. I said something to you in the email, and you were like joking me back. It was like, no, or
I
something.
don't have.
So-
Well, it's not new, but it's a poem
Right.
that I like.
that you want to share.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay. It's called Poetry Saves Lives.
Ah, there you go.
As a child, Uncle John would sit me on his lap and read all the greats, like Whitman and Sandburg and Dickinson and Edgar Guest, my Grandma P's fave. I slept with images of them and their livelihoods tucked into my dreams and my memories. I started writing poems around that time about the mountains of Montana and the skies over the prairies and the fields all golden brown that my brothers and sister and I would run through. In college, I took poetry and entered writing contests and things like that, and critics were always saying, not great. I studied communication and wrote poems to get me through. In graduate school, they said, it's time for highfalutin thought and highfalutin writing and no more fun. This is serious now and poems aren't serious. So I stopped writing poems, and that was the first time I thought I'd die. The second was when I got married and divorced, and I felt pain. I felt real pain and was alone. But I'd wake up at 5 a.m. with words in the pit of my chest, words that written down gave me something. I wrote poetry to get me through, to get me up in the morning when the heaviness of things could not be factually extracted, but could be written in a feeling, and putting it there put me there too. I teach communication, but always sneak in poems. And when we speak, we are all right there. We are all right there in the moments and the spaces of the words upon a page. I took philosophy in graduate school, but always snuck in poems in opposition to the ways we are supposed to think, the ways we are supposed to be. It interrupts our knowledges, our ways of thinking abstractly, our ways of complicating things, our ways of being important, our ways to think, our ways to think. We think ourselves into guns and bombs and houses the size of fortresses and burgers the size of animals and rings the size of marriages. We think ourselves into nuclear weapons and bomb shelters and subdivisions the size of big cities and salads sold fresh at McDonald's and marriages the size of wedding rings. We want to change the world. We ought to save our souls. And let me tell you what I know, and I am just one lady and don't know much, but what I do know is this: a feeling found in a word, a movement catapulted through ink, an entryway into the world.
Very good, nice. I like it. That's great. Yeah, poetry can save lives. It saved a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my cohort and friend Cheryl Nothey, who teaches here in town, that's what she always tells people, is that poetry saves lives. Saved her life. Because a teacher told her at some point that she was going to be an author when she grew up, and it like gave her an avenue and a focus, and she just, found herself, found solace and everything in writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking about why somebody would start writing, or what my experience with it has been, and I think part of it really has been that it is a way to have a voice. That sounds very cliche, but if you're a quiet person even, or a shyer person, or just a person, a human being in this world,
Right.
To have something to say, by writing it, we can share it even with ourselves.
Right, because it forces somebody else to stop and read it, and you do a good job of reading too, by the way. I mean, the pace in which, especially with the short lines, it's kind of dictates a pace that forces us to listen almost. I think writing kind of forces us to listen, whether we hear it out loud or see it on the page.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a way to gain voice, or to be heard.
Yeah.
To put it down and
Yeah.
share it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That was a great poem.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of a little biographical tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and poetry is it's typically at least I was raised with it, and you were too, I guess, on your uncle's knee, that it was a very formal and very very calculated, educated way of communicating. You say you teach communication. What do you mean by that? What does that mean, to be a teacher of communication?
Well, I teach public speaking and interpersonal relationship skills, so courses that are in that area of study.
Right. Well, those are two things that I would say are pretty relatable to poetry.
Definitely.
The expression of it, and then the consideration of it before you open your mouth. As my 8th grade teacher used to say, engage brain before opening mouth. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're definitely so interrelated. And, a lot of people talk about how poetry was meant to be heard. So the speaking component of it is part of the idea of it, I suppose. I like to read poems though too, but I guess I always kind of felt like I wouldn't study writing or words or English directly. That was too I don't know if it was just too intimidating, or I didn't want to like go for it in that way. So I took other kinds of classes, but I'd always take a writing class and be writing, but not have that be my focus.
Right.
So
Was like classical poetry intimidating?
I think it is extremely.
Well, I think that's what the general public would
Yeah.
they say 9 times out of 10 was, well, I don't understand poetry.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're not alone there. There's a lot of poetry that's not meant to be understood. It's just, for whatever reason, you know, it's there. And I've said this 150 times, but I fell in love with Shakespeare when we started reading it out loud in high school, right? As a freshman, sophomore in high school or whatever, I fell in love with it and I didn't know what the hell was going on. I mean, I really didn't understand exactly all that language and what they were saying. But it was like music. It was like a song kind of in a way.
Yeah.
And there was something about the words in your mouth and, you know,
Yeah.
on a stage because it was meant to be done out loud.
Right. I feel like, too, there are still people who, if they find out that I like poetry or that I like to write poetry, they have that sort of reaction, like, oh, it's so dry, boring, and just maybe the experience in a lot of our educational experiences was a little bit narrow.
It was.
There's so much poetry. There are so many kinds and styles.
And it's like there's so much more now. Over the last 30 years or whatever, it's just, I mean, you could never read even close to half of it in your lifetime if that's all you did. You know, there's just that much going on constantly, and the internet has a lot to do with that. And just opening up and people just becoming more confident and more expressive to say, yeah, I can do that, and doing it. You know, yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Everybody should be a poet.
I think so too.
Everybody should write poetry.
Everybody is one. They just haven't written it down yet, right?
Right. That's my take on it. Totally.
So can I ask? So how's it been as the Poet Laureate? I know this is.
Yeah, well, it's been, probably not, I mean, it has been, I've tried to do, I thought as kind of the Poet Laureate is, you're supposed to be kind of a representative or a service oriented, it seemed like to me, was the idea of it. So I've tried to do a lot of things like that. And we've done like, I don't know, you're in like number 56 or 7 or something like that. We're knocking towards 60 of these things. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And so that's good. I mean, I've spent a lot of time doing that.
Nice.
And I've been to a few places, to talk to people, and that's always fun to be able to read your own stuff and then just bullshit with people, and they get to ask questions and tell their stories, and it's just like a going home. It's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I haven't done a lot of it. A lot of it was because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And the pandemic sort of launched us into this sort of video world of creating an archive of all the poets, because initially I'd thought about trying to go around and, pop over to Great Falls and get together with you and whoever else I could find over there.
Yeah.
Zarzinski still lives around there. I don't know if he'd come out of his house to read a poem with me, but people like, try to go to different places around the state where I know people existed and then do things, but then the pandemic didn't allow that, so we did this instead, or I did this. But it's been busy, and it's fun because you get to sit around and talk poetry all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you get to do that?
Yeah.
I've not had that opportunity prior to this experience,
Right.
other than like with kids in a classroom or places like that. Most of the jobs I've had, nobody really cared too much about the fact that you were a poet.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love that you've been able to do 60 almost
videos.
60 talks with poets in Montana. There are a lot of poets in Montana.
Oh my God!
Turns out.
Oh yeah, well, and we haven't even. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably well, again, because of the fact that there's so many I don't even know that are
Right.
younger people. You know, I mean, it's like obviously, look in the mirror. Most of the people I know, and I started with the oldest ones I could find
Nice.
first to try to get them in the archive.
Yeah.
Which was impetus to do it because several people I knew passed away in the last few years, and they were wonderful poets, and they were homegrown Montana poets, you know. And I thought, wow, that's too bad that we didn't, get those people in too. So,
Definitely.
so that's kind of is the impetus to do it.
Yeah.
Somebody will come along, and the next poet laureate will do something else. I do. One of the discoveries of this whole thing with the pandemic and being able to do these videos was, I think that if they're going to have this position, a poet laureate of the state of Montana, you should give that person some kind of funds to then do something like this video series or whatever kind of an art installation project it might be, because that will last over time. And, without that, it's not going to happen, I mean, so.
Yeah.
I know the legislature's out of session, but my 2 bits for you there.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, dig in your pocket for a couple of nickels. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad that you.
I mean,
mentioned
I know
that.
there's a whole lot of people, and I early on I thought, well, who the hell would want to do that? Who would want to run around and spend all their time and money trying to represent poetry if you wouldn't be compensated
Yeah.
for it anyway,
Yeah.
or if there was no sort of project-oriented funding available for you to do something.
Right.
And then, of course, the ego and your vanity or whatever it is gets the best of you, and someone says, "Oh, we'd love for you to be the poet laureate," and you go, "Okay, I guess I could do that." Right? We're human beings, I guess, but it is I think it's a worthwhile thing.
Yeah.
This is going to be worthwhile. It'll be here after we're both dead and gone. Not that anybody will watch it. But, yeah.
My mom.
Yeah,
My
there you
mom
go.
will watch it.
Yeah. Of course, she'll be
Maybe
gone
Gary.
too, probably by that time.
Yeah. Don't say that. Don't say that.
Yeah.
Oh. Well,
Your
thank you.
kids. No, don't see that on the horizon. No.
I did get married, and I did
Yeah.
buy a home with my husband, but that's as traditional as probably I'll go.
Yeah. Marriage and a new place, and
Yep. Probably getting a dog.
there you go.
That's in the future.
That's a full family right there.
Oh
then.
yeah.
That's like kids.
Yeah. It's enough responsibility.
What else is going on in your world? Anything exciting? Anything you want to talk about in regards of
Well,
anything?
I just started writing for a magazine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little magazine out of Great Falls called Lifestyles, Treasure State Lifestyles. And we're really focused on agriculture and covering rural communities. So I'm really excited about that. That's one of the reasons I was in Conrad,
Yeah.
just to hear more of the stories of what people are doing in these small towns. So I'm looking forward to that. And I started teaching at Great Falls College, so I'm teaching there part-time, and that's just really fun. I get to be in person this fall, and I'm so excited about that because I've been teaching online.
Yeah.
So just to be present, that's important to me.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's way different. Yeah. I mean, the Zoom thing is great, and we learned a lot, and probably save us some money and pollution and other things to be able to do things rather than travel so much. But being in person is totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good to be in Montana, and
Yeah, your reference to the visiting the agricultural community and checking in with people and whatnot reminded me of, I remember growing up, the Mineral Independent, which was a little paper out of Superior. Superior was the county seat of Mineral County, right? And so, one of the columns that was in that paper was called Meandering with Marge, and I don't even remember what Marge's last name was. But Meandering with Marge, she would kind of, venture out of the big metropolitan area of Superior, Montana, to the, up to Saltese and to Borgia and Hagen at that end of the county, and then maybe come down to Tarkio, Alberton way, because it's just a very small strip of county there. And she'd stop in and see somebody, and so it would be that kind of a reporting on local families and what was going on. And they had a visit last week from their son Bill, who now resides in Salt Lake City, and it was just the gossip kind of a thing,
Totally.
Checking up on people.
That
was fun.
I love that too. That makes me think of my grandmother's letters, and how she would describe every minute detail about everything going on with all these people, and we had no idea who they were, but it's part of the history of her life and what's happening, and love that.
A friend of mine did give me a box of old letters that he got when they closed out a ranch over there in that neck of the woods where I'm from, and I live kind of like right close to where the edge of this place was, and so the letters were all written like in the 20s, and so they're like 100 years old, and that was pretty cool to read through those letters. And I thought, wow, there's probably a book in here. If somebody wanted to dig into it, they were really good writers. And not just their penmanship was really legible, but they also could write sentences and paragraphs and communicate and follow a line of thought, and they knew how to write. They knew how to. They were readers too, obviously, because they were good writers.
Neat.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And there was like a commuter train that went through there, and they could get on a train in Alberton, which is 30 miles west of here, and come into Missoula and spend the day in town. They could catch another one going back out. It's like, wow, that's really, you think about commuting back then, you never thought that was a possibility. And sometimes they would take, the horse and the sleigh and whatnot to go 6, 8, 10 miles, like down to 9 Mile or places like that, and tell these stories.
I love it just really interrupts how our sense of time and space, even just thinking about all the important things that can happen even in a span of a day between Alberton and Missoula, right? And getting on the train and I just love that.
And they had to do all this work, the farm related stuff. They all had, of course, work, with animals and things they needed to do before they did anything, before they left or went anywhere, and then they had to make sure they had to get back at a certain point in time, because there would be those chores again. Probably somebody was there during the day, mom or dad, that would pick up maybe the second shift if they went to Missoula or something. But they also went to school, and exactly all the stuff that they would do in a day, and on foot, a lot of it. Too. People were active and mentally, physically, and needed to be.
Yeah. And living these lives.
Yeah. And it's not that we don't do a whole bunch of stuff, but it's just different. Virtual world of reality.
It's interesting.
Well, is there anything else in that collection of certain women? What the idea for the book, Poems for Certain Women? Why that title?
Well, the experience for me, like I mentioned, was a lot of things, but one of them was empowering. It was, I wanted to make the choices for my life that I wanted to make, whatever they were going to be. And so the certain women part is, I hope, kind of an encouragement for us as women to take up that opportunity that we have to do the things we want to do, and make our lives happen.
Right.
So, but I'm glad that in the preface that you wrote for the book, you mentioned that, even as an old white dude, those are your words, you found some joy, or you could find some points of connection in the work. So I was happy about that.
Oh, no, yeah, I was being a smart ass, of course. No, I mean, it's very obvious that it's a great journey. I mean, and I say that from the point of view of a man. I mean, you're never going to be totally in the head of maybe the opposite gender for a lot of different reasons. But human beings are human beings, and the book communicates on that level. And trying to put yourself in the position of a woman that age at that time in that environment. I mean, it's fairly conservative. We know what the conservative roles of women have been in the world. I mean, you got the vote 100 years ago. What are you complaining about? This kind of thing. So trying to put yourself in those shoes. I mean, that's what I think about reading, about poetry, is it allows us to walk in somebody else's shoes. It allows us to learn empathy, try to anyway, what it's like to be someone else or have their experience. And then develop some compassion as a result, right? I mean, that's what we would hope we could do as a culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, and I love how you put that, and I feel like empathy is just more and more needed.
Yeah.
We should all be, all of us, every single one of us should be endeavoring to empathize with those around us.
Yeah.
Whoever
really.
they are.
Well, I mean, typically I thought that's what the whole American thing was all about, really.
Right?
I mean, I thought that was the
Idea?
Lady Liberty thing. I thought that was the whole idea, right? Is we're supposed to, embrace everybody and everything, and then allow for everyone to be who they are, whoever the hell they are.
Yeah.
And why that is getting so much pushback at this stage of the game is a head scratcher for me. Or that the bulk of us just say, as the dude said in The Big Lebowski, no man, this aggression will just not stand.
Yeah. That was a good impression. Yeah, and I'm grateful that I thank you for supporting the work and including it in the Foothills series, and I'm really grateful to you and Foothills Publishing and my dear friend Gary, who just became a dear literary friend at an important time in my life, and we've shared the love of words, and that's been a really important relationship in my life. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I don't have anything else that I need to add to the conversation. I think I've run off at the mouth a lot. What about you?
No.
Anything else that you want to add to that as a footnote, or?
No, I don't think so. But yeah, it's been a fun year. I got to do readings from the book at different places in Montana, and that was really fun. And I think one of the best parts of that was connecting especially with other women who have had experiences similar and could really relate to what I was talking about. And I think that helped me feel less alone even through the experience. And I love that words and writing can connect us to each other.
Right.
So this notion about empathy and connection through language it's a powerful possibility.
It is, and poetry has always been a great vehicle for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've always shared poetry traditionally, even when, emotions weren't expressed much in any way, shape, or form. If you needed to do it at some point, somebody brought out a poem. Whether it was a funeral or a wedding or whatever, and I think that's true of poetry, so it helps us make those connections.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it was just a joy. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Well, Amy Ray Pearson, and her book is Poems of Certain Women, poems for certain women. Pardon me, I edited it and I can't remember the title. But it's available at Foothills Publishing and maybe at a local bookstore near you. Join us again, and we'll have another poet in Montana for you. Bye.
Bye.